Good evening. This is Maestro Cretella with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite podcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Ashes of Typhon. Our first player today, well, it says Winkle, but this is not Winkle. This is actually Torpid. He is playing as the Grey Knight Bro Captain. Bro Captain is a tanky melee hero. Not very good at countering melee because he can't actually disrupt on demand, and he doesn't do a whole lot of damage to start out. Nobody really does a whole lot of damage to start out, but either way, he can actually be kind of overwhelmed by melee. Mostly just good for tanking. He is very tanky, especially if you get like an early Aegis armor. Is that how you say it? Yeah, anyway, Bro Captain. Played by Torpid, not Winkle. Next up, we've got Maestro Cretella playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer, who were something's going on in the warp. Couldn't target him properly. But he is a spellcasting hero. He's got Doom Bolt, a long-range damage spell. He can teleport a bunch. He also can mind control, snare, and a few other tricks up his sleeve.
Adding support structure.
So Winkle was a dedicated Grey Knight player who was pretty solid, but at some point he just disappeared and stopped playing. This is actually, and Torpid decided to name himself Winkle after Winkle, that player. That being said, Torpid is actually a lot better than Winkle, so I thought it was kind of strange. Although he also did say that he kind of tricked me into playing him, because otherwise I probably would have been too scared to play him if I had known originally that this was Torpid and not actually Winkle. And as you can see, I've actually made myself the focus of cast a lot more lately. I don't know if you can see that, but it's something that's been happening. I've been playing games more and actually deciding to actually just cast my own games. There was a period, certainly when I first started out casting, I would actually cast myself just because those were the replays that I had available to cast. These days I'm actually choosing to cast a lot of my own games, since I actually know which ones are good, and believe it or not, I'm actually kind of good at this game. I usually don't bother too much to talk about like my own skill level, and there's definitely a class of players that is a bit above me, including this guy right here, Torpid. But as I said, I am actually kind of good at this game. I do tend to psych myself out a bit against higher level players, though. Now, right here, this matchup, there's been discussion about this matchup lately. Well, not lately, I actually came late to discussion, but some people have actually been saying that the Sorcerer struggles a lot against Grey Knights in Tier 1, and it's actually coming up right now. Torpid is actually saying it himself. And I actually disagree with that, at least in my experiences. But that's coming, then again, I haven't really... It's actually rare footage of me being cocky. It doesn't happen very often. But in my experiences, I've actually found it pretty easy to fight against Grey Knights in Tier 1 as the Sorcerer. My approach to this matchup has been actually being aggressive with melee. So that's why I go for Raptors, even though I kind of hate Raptors and I almost never get them in any other matchup. I also go for, although I haven't gotten it yet, I also go for the old school bread and butter play of the Sorcerer, which is combining the teleport armor and the Sword of Flame, and using him aggressively to teleport and tie things up. So I use both of those, the Raptors and the Sorcerer. I want to tie up the Strike Squad, tie up the Stormtroopers, and then that clears the way for the Heretics to get into melee while taking minimal damage. And I mean, of course, the Sorcerer and the Raptors do their own damage as well, but most of the real damage comes from the Heretics. Of course, what's tough about the Heretics is that they are squishy. They've only got 75 health per model, and you're using an ability where they voluntarily kill one of those models. So sometimes it's hard to get them into melee. So like my strategy is I tie things up, or I get into melee safely with the Sorcerer and the Raptors. They get into melee, and tie things up, and that allows the Heretics to get in pretty safely. And then the Heretics are the real damage dealer or money maker. One concern that people have brought up in this matchup is the Brother Captain. The Brother Captain is really tanky, very tough, and traditionally the Sorcerer struggles with single entities, in part because he has an opening, just the way this opening works out, where he doesn't have a whole lot of range damage coming out of his composition, and that's very much true for how I'm going right now. Pretty much my only dedicated ranged unit are the Chaos Space Marines. They do about 40 DPS out of the gate. That's less than Dire Avengers, less than Tactical Marines, less than upgraded Shooter Boys. So I'm not putting out a whole lot of range DPS. What I feel more comfortable about in this matchup compared to other tanky melee heroes is that I can pretty safely ignore the Brother Captain in Tier 1, because he doesn't really do enough damage for him to be a big deal, and he also can't disrupt on command. So I'm not terribly scared. I can pretty easily run past him, go for the Strike Squad, go for the Stormtroopers. In other matchups, that's not quite as viable, I find, because you have, first of all, better melee counters coming out of other squads. Say, like against the Chaos Lord, you would have to also deal with other heretics that would be stopping you from meleeing aggressively. Against a Space Marine player, you would have Shotgun Scouts, and you can't melee as aggressively as you could in this matchup. So, and that's traditionally been Grey Knight's weakness, that they aren't really good at stopping melee, at least early on. And that comes from not having, again, melee counters like Heretics or Shotgun Scouts, and their hero also does not disrupt on command. Even though he's a tanky melee hero, he does not disrupt on command. So again, I'm just a lot more comfortable doing that. I also, to be honest, I don't fully... Part of me still doesn't fully take Grey Knight seriously as a 1v1 race, and my knowledge might just be outdated. I've definitely seen some very powerful things from Grey Knight players. But I don't know, I still haven't really fully taken Grey Knight seriously as a race, and in the first game I actually didn't play the Sorcerer, and I also got destroyed really horribly. My first game against Torpid, that is. That being said, although I still don't fully take Grey Knight seriously, I certainly take this player seriously, and very seriously, in fact. I consider myself slightly out of my league, but I'm probably underestimating myself a little bit, and that is how you get to the next league. But I'm doing a lot of stuff where I did have an engagement where basically I'm choosing what I want to engage. The interceptors teleport around a lot. I don't remember what the energy cost is, but they can teleport around a lot. They'll be able to teleport around even more if the Brother Captain gets the Canticle of Absolution. But anyway, we're both going to Tier 3. It looks like Torpid's doing better economically than me. I mean, we're both going to Tier 2. Started Tier 2 first. He's also got more resources in the bank. And what did he spend? He's got Sergeants on his Stormtroopers. Makes them more durable, gives them a little more range damage. Pretty good for focus fire. I've got double Aspiring Champion Heretics. And I do have a Sorcerer with 2 War Gears. So it looks like I've spent slightly more. Yeah, I have. So I did have a slightly more expensive Tier 1. Anyway, Sorcerer uses Doom Bolts first and then teleports in. And it's the whole... Lately, I feel like I haven't seen as much of the Sword of Flame and Vestments of the Warp play. It used to be all I did in retail. These days I don't do it as much. And the Sorcerer generally, he kind of has like two basic modes that he does. He'll either do the Teleport Armor and Sword of Flame, or he'll be focusing on Doom Bolts. And of course, part of the issue is that those two basic modes are kind of at odds at each other. Because teleporting in with the Sword of Flame is an aggressive play. That means the Sorcerer gets extremely close. Whereas using Doom Bolts is like the opposite. You're keeping yourself at as long distance as possible, keeping the Sorcerer safe and shooting this long-range artillery ability. So they're kind of at odds with each other, although you can do what I did in that case, which is I used Doom Bolts first, and then I teleported in with the Sword of Flame. Now, of course, Doom Bolts, when you use Doom Bolts, you want to have 100 energy or more, so you can get that second volley of 3 Doom Bolts. If you don't have 100 energy or more, you will only get 3 Doom Bolts, so you only get half damage. Anyway, we've got a Rhino out from Torpid. This is going to be pretty annoying. It functions like a Razorback, although it has 500 health out of the gate instead of, well, 500 health once you get the vehicle armor. 500 health instead of 400 like the Razorback. The Razorback can also get 600 if you get the extra armor, so better than a vanilla Razorback, but not as good as a fully upgraded Razorback. But it functions exactly the same and can still work out very nicely. I don't think quite as good synergy with the Grey Knight composition as with the Space Marine composition. It's debatable. You can generally the best thing you can do with the Razorback is that you can always put shotgun scouts in it, and then if you have a Rhino that's threatened by melee units like Howling Banshees, you can have them jump out, shotgun blast, and then that counters any melee trying to get at the Razorback. The Rhino doesn't have as much quite like that. Maybe if you had Purgations, the Purgation Squad. But Winkle, I actually called him Winkle. Torpid doesn't have a Razorback yet, or he doesn't have a Purgation, rather. Now I've got a Chaos Dreadnought out. I like the Chaos Dreadnought. It's something I go to. It's kind of my go-to tier 2 unit, and I do it a lot, to be honest, just out of comfort. I do it a lot out of comfort, but it's not always the best choice, but it's at least a good enough choice that it's usually not the wrong choice, or it's usually not a terrible choice. Anyway, Canticle of Absolution has been activated, but as you can see, the range is actually the range was limited, so I was able to, Now, unfortunately, this was a mismanaged engagement by me. I had teleported a Heretic Squad, and then I had retreated. I had used the Warp Global on this Heretic Squad, but I made a mistake. I had meant to retreat my Heretic Squad that was nearly dead. Instead, I retreated the one that had full health. So both I lost one of the Heretic Squads that I didn't... One of the Heretic Squads, as well as the other one didn't get to do as much in that engagement as I had originally intended. Now, apparently the crack grenades disables vehicles in addition to being a snare. I didn't realize that at first. I thought I was just going to be able to continue shooting while being snared, but crack grenades, apparently that's like a haywire. Now, unfortunately for Torpid, he still does not really have enough to actually destroy my Dreadnought, because he's only got the crack grenade. He doesn't actually have any kind of AV follow-up. He chose to get a heavy bolter on his Rhino, and that does make it a lot better for anti-infantry. Actually, I was actually really impressed with how well the Rhino with the heavy bolter works out. I mean, it basically is a Razorback, so it actually shouldn't be that surprising. Although, I don't actually have that great of an understanding of Razorback play. I can certainly talk about the conceptual reasons for getting a Razorback, but my actual grasp of how to use a Razorback isn't really that good. I'm not really that good with transports, in part because I main a race that doesn't have them. Anyway, we now have a Vindicare Assassin out for Torpid. Now, a Vindicare Assassin, of course, is going to... something that I need to be very careful about with my Dreadnought, because it does do ranged AV. At the same time, the Vindicare Assassin is quite a glass cannon. Need to be very careful with him, especially around jump units. And I'm actually chasing down the Rhino, chasing it down with my Khorne Space Marines, who do some very light AV because they have plasma pistols and melta pistols. And with some more power melee hits, I actually take out the Razorback, finish it off with the Khorne Space Marines. Now, Khorne Space Marines are a both underused unit and a unit that a lot of people think aren't that good, and to be honest, there's definitely a lot of truth to it. There's definitely some limitations to a lot of prohibitive weaknesses as well as prohibitive characteristics about the Khorne Space Marines that make them an undesirable unit. That being said, one of their unique advantages is actually the way they can chase down transports. Because they're so fast, they're not incredibly powerful as an AV unit, but they're very good at chasing down things because they have that extra speed. They also have quite a bit of range damage, believe it or not, coming out of all those plasma pistols and the melta pistols. I mean, not huge, but it's much more substantial than the range damage coming out of most other squads. And it's also not bolt pistols. Those are plasma pistols on every member, and then except for the aspiring champion who has a melta pistol. Anyway, Dreadnought, I very barely got the Dreadnought out alive. It actually looked like the Vindicare Assassin should have finished it off. He was definitely in range, but I think he didn't have sight. Anyway, Vindicare Assassin now in a lot of trouble, and he actually goes down. So that's just another, some more of that risk. You really can't leave the Vindicare Assassin in against a melee unit, pretty much. He really just needs to get out of there. I feel like treating him the way I would treat a Devastator or a Havoc against Stormboys. Since Stormboys do so much power melee damage that if you don't react immediately to a Havoc or a Devastator getting jumped by Stormboys, you pretty much lose the squad. So that's why I feel like with a Vindicare Assassin, you really need to react immediately to a melee unit actually getting in range of it, and a jump unit especially. Like, just get him out of there. So suddenly I've got the bigger unit count. I've gotten some Bloodletters out on the field. Part of what's risky about my current build is that I have very limited AV capabilities. And all of my AV capabilities, well, not all of them, but most of my AV capabilities reside in the Dreadnought. That's extremely risky just because if I lose the Dreadnought, then I have almost no AV. Anyway, I've got some Bloodletters out on the field. Bloodletters, man, are they really amazing. Like, there is actually... I feel like I've only been really coming to appreciate them over like the past 2 months or so. But they are, to be honest, they're still probably slightly overpowered and still a little too good. Despite being nerfed from retail to elite. And some people have argued that it's not actually a nerf because they're still freaking good, and against power armor they're actually even more powerful than they were before. But they just don't have the versatility that they used to have, so it's definitely still a nerf. It's definitely still a nerf. Anyway, Raptors get out of there just barely. 15 hit points and 2 models. A very, very close call. Also a close call on my Sorcerer. So I really dodged a few bullets right there. I mean, just the combination of... if I had lost both my Raptors and my Sorcerer right there, I would have been in a really, really weak position. I probably would have had to cancel Tier 3. But Torpid now has some Paladins coming out on the field. I've actually got a new squad of Heretics. I think I got them... I think one of the reasons I got them actually was for map control, because I felt I needed it for map control. Especially since I knew my other Heretic squad was going to be on repair duty. Or maybe I put this one that has no aspiring champion on repair duty, and the other one's on fighting. And I basically felt like everything else I had, since I had lost my other Heretic, I felt like I needed pretty much everything to work together for fighting. Otherwise, I was like missing some kind of critical component to my composition. So I just felt I needed a new squad of Heretics. Anyway, Terminators are now out, or rather Paladins. There's certainly a lot of potential damage against them. I've got Bloodletters, Chaos Space Marines, I've got Heretics for worship support, as well as the damage they contribute. So I really have a lot of sources of damage against Paladins, but Paladins are still going to give me a tough time. Terminators in general, I personally feel are pretty strong. I think some people have disagree with me, just from some of the discussions I've seen, as well as some changes that are coming up to Terminators. I don't know if those changes also apply to the Paladins, but I'm guessing they do. The changes that have been proposed are like slight damage decreases to Terminators, but they get more durable and more tanky, and specifically, they get a lot more health regeneration. This is a change that's coming up that I personally don't... I'm actually not really fond of it. I don't think it's a good idea. But it's going to happen. And we'll see how it works out just in the next patch, pretty much. Anyway, I lost my Dreadnought right there. And I'm not even sure that I really tried to micro it out of there. I don't know if there was much that I could have done. I think the most that I probably could have done was teleport my Sorcerer out and then use the Warp Whirl. And you know, I probably could have done that. But I think just in the moment, I kind of just gave up on the Dreadnought. And I don't know, maybe I should have saved it. Maybe I should have tried. But just, it got hit by the crack grenade, and then it was being damaged by the Paladins. if anything, I may have been content to let it go. I don't feel like it would have actually... I felt it might have been more of a liability against the Paladins than a help. Certainly, in just its autocannon form, it would probably be a liability. I would need some kind of upgrade. Either these... I mean, the Tzeentch missile launcher would do a lot of damage from range, and then, of course, the Mark of Khorne would do a lot of damage up close. But I didn't really feel like either one of those was really worth it, because I felt like either one of those was probably going to be hard to keep my Dreadnought alive against the Paladins. If they get in melee against a Tzeentch Dreadnought, it's no harder than taking out an autocannon Dreadnought, and then I would spend the extra resources to upgrade the Dreadnought and just lose it anyway. The Mark of Khorne Dreadnought would do a lot more damage to the Paladins. It would last a lot longer, but I still feel like it would ultimately die in the end. Now, Torpid is doing a better job of controlling the map, and I'm feeling it at this point. Like although I got a VP lead after not having one, I'm actually feeling a bit of the strain of basically he's starting to control the map and starting to control 2 VPs, and I'm not feeling that comfortable about it. A little bit risky here though with the Terminators. They actually have an incinerator. And I managed to save my Predator by subjugating the Paladins and having them walk out of there. Still need to be careful, though. And I had some of my other squads go for a generator bash, and that might actually not be that great of an idea to be trying to bash generators this late in the game when I need to worry about VPs. But I always like to bash generators. I want the red, and I kind of wanted the extra experience and levels for these squads right here. Level 3 Raptors, almost level 3 Khorne Chaos Space Marines. But at the same time, I feel like I should be engaging. Look at how much that cannon shot took out of the Stormtroopers. Now I have some Bloodletters in melee. They did a lot of damage, but they're also very quickly losing health. And I need I'm using some Worship support so that the Bloodletters can get some health regeneration. Doom Bolts go in. Full damage Doom Bolts. Only take out, well, a full Doom Bolt volley, but I think those Doom Bolts may have been slightly off. And I'm kind of committing to this engagement, and I have a lot of sources of damage against the Paladins. Unfortunately, I think my Bloodletters were idling, maybe because they were partially infiltrated, so they weren't doing anything. So they didn't do as much in that engagement as they could have, I think. And ultimately still end up losing this engagement. Now, this was unfortunately a huge mistake, and I think, yeah, I end up losing my Raptors right there. And I tried to use, or do I? They actually still look like they're alive. Oh, but of course the Interceptor teleports, so... No! Wow. I did save it, except there's a Bro Captain right here. Wow. Okay. Anyway. Take out the Bro Captain for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I lost the Raptors there. I had rather unwisely tried to use their ability, which I don't think it was actually worth it. It wasn't going to win me that engagement, and they also got knocked down when they had tried using that ability, which I think hurt me a lot. Subjugated Paladins again, but unfortunately that actually ends up being really poor timing, and I end up losing my Sorcerer, which is actually a really big deal. I also lost... Did I lose a Heretic Squad? No, but I came pretty close to it. Paladins are now in a bit of trouble. So is the Terminator Librarian, and I'm actually having trouble deciding what I want to focus on. I get really close to taking out the Terminator Librarian, so I go for that, thinking I might not have as much chance of taking out the Paladins, but actually look at how dead the Paladins are. So Terminator Librarian's going to get out of there, but Paladins don't. VP is pretty even at this point, and I've even got my Heretics going around backcapping. Predator tank is actually not upgraded, and I often go with not upgrading a Predator tank. Of course, at least with the Predator, like, all of the upgrades are straight upgrades. Well, actually, that's not entirely true, since a las cannon Predator will tend to miss a little bit, but usually you do want to upgrade your Predator. It doesn't matter whether it's a Space Marine Predator or a Chaos Predator, you want to upgrade it, ideally. But I also personally feel that you actually don't need to. You want to, but a Predator is actually entirely functional in its default form. It's still very, very good and very powerful, even without a Mark or even a Space Marine Predator, without the extra armor and without the without the las cannon. So I used an Imperial Abyss there. That's 500 red down the drain at a time when maybe I didn't actually need to do that. It kind of just bought me some time, and it got a squad off the VPs, and that does help the VPs ticking to just keep ticking in my favor. But it wasn't at a time when I absolutely needed it, so that may not have been such a good choice to use it right then and there. Interceptors, man, they teleport around a lot. They are level 4. They did wipe some Raptors out. We've got some levels in some of these squads as well. Level 2 Librarian, level 3 Strikes, level 4 Stormtroopers. Level 6 broke out, and even a level 5 Sorcerer. I'm actually surprised at that. Although I have been using the Vestments of the Warp and Sword of Flame play. Now, one of the other differences that I didn't mention about those two different modes of playing the Sorcerer, when you focus on using a Doombolt Sorcerer, you generally aren't getting many levels at all. You'll have like a level 1, level 2 Sorcerer by the time you're tier 2, maybe a level 3 Sorcerer by the end of the game. And a lot of the reason that is because although Doombolts are very powerful and actually have more damage potential overall than playing an aggressive melee Sorcerer, you generally don't kill models. It's just something about the way the ability works, where usually you don't kill models until the squad is already nearly dead. Maybe it's because it does area of effect damage, and when you do a lot of damage with Doombolts, you're just damaging every single model. Teleporting Sorcerer with the Sword of Flame actually does get you a lot of levels, though, because you're teleporting him in, he's doing melee damage, hitting one model at a time. And that actually works out now. Paladins are chasing up my Predator, and the Predator choice, I feel like it's... In some ways, I almost feel like it may not have been that great of a choice. It seemed to do okay in some engagements, but it ended up getting finished off. And that also puts me in a really weak position, actually, not having that Predator. But Paladins are like one of the main AV answers for the Grey Knights, which is extremely odd considering it's a tier 3 unit and it's a melee unit. Usually melee units by themselves are not really considered sufficient against vehicles because they're a melee unit. So most vehicles are able to really just run away from them, especially tanks. That being said, there's something about Terminators, or specifically, there's something about Paladins. They seem to do just fine, even just chasing down vehicles, despite the attempts of vehicles to kite the Paladins. The Paladins still just seem to actually work as AV. And I think a lot of it has to do with actually how tanky they are. They can tank whatever damage is coming out of most vehicles. And of course, if they get the Psy Cannon, they can actually do some anti-vehicle damage on approach. Now, I'm in a really weak position now, unfortunately. I've got a new squad of Paladins to deal with, I've got all the other things to deal with, and I've kind of lost some of my stuff. Alright, Paladins use their teleport, but then the Interceptors teleport away from the Paladins. So Interceptors actually just get out of there. But now the Paladins are not subjugated anymore, and I've said this before in another cast, and I don't know which cast I'll actually upload first, but the Tome of Subjugation by itself is not really enough to deal with, oh, and apparently I lost a squad of heretics as well that I was trying to capture. Now the VPs are really even, but the Tome of Subjugation by itself is really not enough to counter Terminators or Paladins, even though it's obviously one of the Sorcerer's main answers, and even though it can sometimes result in Terminators and Paladins getting trolled really, really hard, you really need to have like a favorable positioning and favorable engagement first before you can actually make use of it that way. Otherwise, it's really not enough, because you just get control of the Terminators or Paladins for 10 seconds, but you're not actually doing any damage to them, and you can't do enough in 10 seconds. Sometimes you can't even necessarily win the engagement in that much time. But as you notice, it's now a triple cap for Torpid, so he's going to take this game, and I was doing so well. But I find one of the things that happens is when I do play against really good players, one of two things tends to happen. Either I get destroyed, or I have a really close game where I'm actually winning, and then I blow it. Which, I mean, it's part of their experience winning out against mine. Their experience and expertise. Although, like I said, I'm not a bad player myself. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.